The dust of the lonely trail settled around Zachary Blackwell as he rode into Yerington, Nevada. The summer of 1872, bringing scorching heat that seemed to sear through his weathered denim jacket. He'd been hired as security for the Carson and Colorado Railroad surveyors, but the letter in his pocket weighed heavier than any gun. He carried a desperate plea from a dying friend to honor a marriage contract that now fell to him. The small mining town sprawled before him, its wooden buildings bleached by the relentless Nevada sun. Zachary dismounted his chestnut mare outside the Yerington Hotel, his spurs jingling against the wooden boards of the sidewalk. His mind wasn't on the comfortable bed awaiting him, but on the strange predicament he found himself in, promised to marry a woman he'd never met, the daughter of his father's business partner. Inside the hotel lobby, the clerk glanced up from his ledger. "Name, sir?" "Nathan Blackstone," Zachary replied, removing his hat to reveal hair the color of sun-bleached wheat and eyes as blue as the Nevada sky. "I believe there's a room reserved for me," the clerk nodded, handing over a brass key. "Room 4 up the stairs, and there's a message for you." He slid a folded note across the counter. Nathan took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. "Mr. Blackstone, I am informed of your arrival today. Our arrangement proceeds as planned. Pastor Williams expects us at the church tomorrow at noon. I shall meet you there." Zara Donovan, no pleasantries, no introduction, just the cold statement of a business arrangement. Nathan frowned, folding the note and tucking it into his vest pocket. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life unfolding. At 32, he'd expected to choose his own bride, not inherit one through his father's final business deal. But a promise was a promise, especially one made to a dying man. After washing away the trail dust, Nathan ventured to the saloon for a whiskey and information. The bartender, a man with hands the size of dinner plates, leaned across the bar. "New in town, just arrived. Name's Nathan Blackstone." "Ah, the groom-to-be," the bartender chuckled, pouring amber liquid into a glass. "Word travels fast in Yerington. What can you tell me about Zara Donovan?" The bartender's face changed, something guarded replacing his earlier openness. "Miss Donovan keeps to herself mostly. Runs the mercantile since her father passed last winter. She's—" He hesitated. "Well, you'll meet her tomorrow." "That's not much to go on for a man about to be married," Nathan said, downing his whiskey. "Some stories ain't mine to tell," the bartender replied, moving away to serve another customer. Nathan spent a restless night, his dreams filled with faceless brides and endless desert trails. Morning brought no relief to his unease, but he dressed carefully in his best clothes, a dark suit that had seen better days, but was clean and pressed for the occasion. The church stood at the end of Yerington's Main Street, a simple white clapboard building with a modest steeple. As Nathan approached, he noticed a small group gathered outside, just the pastor, a woman he assumed was the pastor's wife, and a slender figure in white, her face hidden behind a heavy veil. The pastor stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Blackstone, welcome. I'm Pastor Williams. This is my wife, Martha, and of course, Miss Donovan." Nathan nodded to them all, his eyes lingering on the veiled woman. She kept her head bowed, her gloved hands clasped tightly before her. "Shall we proceed?" the pastor asked. Nathan hesitated. "Might I have a moment with Miss Donovan first?" The pastor glanced at the veiled woman, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "Of course. Martha and I will wait inside." As the couple disappeared into the church, Nathan turned to the woman who would soon be his wife. "Miss Donovan, I realize this arrangement is unusual, but I hope we might at least speak before we're married." "There's nothing to discuss, Mr. Blackstone." Her voice came softly from behind the veil. Our fathers arranged this match. I am prepared to honor my father's wishes. As am I, but I'd like to at least see the face of the woman I'm marrying. The veiled figure stiffened. The ceremony will be brief. You needn't concern yourself with how I look. Nathan frowned. That's not what I meant. I just want to meet you properly. Please, her voice trembled. Let's just proceed with the ceremony. Something in her tone made Nathan pause. Was it fear? Resignation? He couldn't tell, but it stirred a protective instinct he hadn't expected to feel. As you wish, he said finally, offering his arm. Inside the small church, the ceremony proceeded with mechanical efficiency. They exchanged vows, Nathan's strong and clear, Zara's barely audible through her veil. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan turned to his new bride, waiting for the traditional moment to seal their union with a kiss. Zara remained frozen, her hands clutching a small bouquet of desert wildflowers. You may kiss your bride, Pastor Williams prompted gently. I would prefer not, Zara whispered. A heavy silence filled the church. Martha Williams looked uncomfortable while her husband cleared his throat. Well then, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Blackstone? The sparse gathering, just the four of them, dispersed quickly. Nathan signed the marriage certificate, watching as his new wife's gloved hand trembled as she added her signature. They walked in silence back toward the center of town. Nathan had secured a small house on the outskirts of Yerington, close enough to town for convenience, but offering privacy for what he'd hoped would be a new beginning. Our home is this way, he said, gesturing down a side street. I need to close the mercantile first, Zara replied, her voice still muffled by the veil. I'll meet you there this evening. Before Nathan could protest, she had turned and hurried away, her white dress disappearing around a corner. He stood in the dusty street, hat in hand, married to a woman whose face he hadn't seen and who clearly wanted nothing to do with him. The mercantile was closed when Nathan passed by later that afternoon. A handwritten sign in the window reading simply, "Closed until further notice." He frowned, continuing to their new home to prepare for his bride's arrival. The house was simple but solidly built, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a small parlor. Nathan had arranged for basic furnishings: a table, chairs, a settee, and beds. He'd even splurged on a bookshelf, remembering that his father had mentioned Edmund Donovan's daughter loved to read. Now, he paced the wooden floors, wondering what kind of marriage this would be. Dusk was settling over Yerington when a light knock sounded at the door. Nathan opened it to find Zara standing there, still wearing her wedding dress, still hidden behind her veil. She carried a small trunk and a wrapped package. "Let me help you with that," he said, taking the trunk from her hands. She followed him inside, remaining near the door as if ready to flee. "I've brought some essentials. The rest of my things can stay at the mercantile for now." "You don't have to keep the store open," Nathan said. "My position with the railroad pays well enough. The store was my father's life. I won't abandon it." Her voice, though soft, carried a steel that surprised him. Nathan set the trunk down in the bedroom he'd prepared for her. "I had Mrs. Johnson from down the street prepare a meal for us. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm. Thank you, but I'm not hungry." Nathan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Mrs. Blackstone, please, don't call me that yet," she interrupted. I need time." "Time for what exactly? We're already married." She stood in silence for a long moment before speaking. "I know this arrangement fulfills our father's wishes, but you should understand what you've committed to." "And what's that?" Her hands moved to her veil, trembling visibly now. "You should see what you've married." Slowly, hesitantly, she raised the heavy veil. Nathan's eyes widened as her face was revealed. A jagged scar ran from her left temple down her cheek to the corner of her mouth. pulling her features into a permanent half-grimace. Her right eye, though a striking green, was clear and bright, but her left was clouded, obviously blind. The scarring continued down her neck, disappearing beneath the high collar of her wedding dress. "Now you understand," she said, her voice hollow. "My father arranged this marriage before the accident. He never had the chance to tell your father what happened. I tried to write, to break the engagement, but your father had already passed, and you were somewhere in the Montana Territory." Nathan stood speechless, not from horror at her appearance, but from the pain evident in every line of her body, the shame that radiated from her as she waited for his rejection. Zara quickly lowered the veil again, turning away. "I understand if you want an annulment." Pastor Williams would be discreet. "No," Nathan said, finding his voice at last. He stepped forward, gently taking her gloved hand. "No annulment. You don't have to pretend. I know what I look like." Nathan reached out, his weathered hand hovering near her veil. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Zara nodded almost imperceptibly. With gentle fingers, he lifted the veil again, his blue eyes meeting her mismatched ones. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Zara stared at him in disbelief, her good eye searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity. "Don't lie to me, not about this." "I've never been much for lying," Nathan replied, his voice steady. "The scars are part of you, but they don't define you." Tears welled in her right eye. "Everyone in town looks away. Children stare, women whisper. Men either pity me or make crude jokes." "Then they're fools," Nathan said firmly. "What happened?" Zara took a shuddering breath. "Fire at the Mercantile. Nearly a year ago now. I was trapped inside trying to save my father's ledgers. A beam fell. He pulled me out, but—" Her voice broke. "He went back in for something. Never came out." Nathan felt a surge of admiration for this woman who had survived such tragedy, who continued to run her father's store despite everything. Without thinking, he reached up and wiped away a tear that had escaped down her unmarred cheek. "I'm sorry about your father. And I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." "You don't need to stay married to me out of obligation," Zara said, pulling away slightly. "The business arrangement between our fathers died with them." Nathan shook his head. "I'm staying married to you because I made a vow today. I don't break my word. And if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to get to know the woman I've married." Zara looked at him with such naked hope and fear that it made his heart ache. "I don't know how to be a wife," she whispered. "And I don't know how to be a husband," Nathan admitted with a small smile. "Perhaps we can learn together." That first night, they ate Mrs. Johnson's stew in awkward silence, Zara keeping her face partially turned away, taking small bites when she thought Nathan wasn't looking. He pretended not to notice, instead telling her about his work with the railroad, about the lands he'd seen in his travels. When it came time to retire, Nathan showed her to her bedroom. "I'll take the other room. Your privacy is yours until you decide otherwise." Gratitude flashed in her eyes before she quickly looked down. "Thank you," she murmured, closing the door softly behind her. Nathan stood in the hallway for a long moment, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought him here, married to a scarred, beautiful woman who feared her own reflection. The following days established a cautious routine. Nathan would leave early for his work with the railroad surveyors, returning in the evening to find Zara had prepared dinner. She had reopened the Mercantile, though she told him she kept a heavy veil on during business hours. "People still come to buy, but they don't linger like they used to," she explained one evening, a week after their wedding. "Some send their children instead." "Their loss," Nathan replied. "They're missing the chance to know you." Zara gave him a skeptical look but didn't argue. Gradually, within the walls of their home, she grew more comfortable without her veil. Nathan never stared at her scars, never flinched when she turned her damaged side toward him. Instead, he found himself noticing other things: the intelligence in her gaze, the curve of her lips when she almost smiled, the graceful way she moved despite her obvious self-consciousness. 2 weeks after their wedding, Nathan returned home to find Zara poring over the mercantile's ledgers, her brow furrowed in concentration, her scarred cheek illuminated by lamplight. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time, she didn't immediately reach for her veil. "Is everything all right?" he asked, nodding toward the ledgers. "Just some discrepancies in the inventory," she replied, pushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Nothing serious." Nathan hung his hat on the peg by the door and crossed to the table. "May I?" he asked, indicating the chair beside her. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. As he sat down, he caught a faint scent of lavender from her hair. "I used to help my father with his accounts," Nathan explained, scanning the neatly written columns of figures. "He insisted I learn, even though I was more interested in horses than numbers." "My father was the same," Zara said, a hint of warmth entering her voice. "He said a merchant's daughter should understand business as well as any son." For the next hour, they worked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they leaned over the ledgers. Nathan was acutely aware of how Zara initially tensed at each contact, then gradually relaxed as the evening progressed. By the time they'd balanced the accounts, she was sitting closer than she ever had before. "Thank you," she said, closing the ledger. In the lamplight, her green eye seemed to glow with warmth. "You didn't have to help. That's what husbands do, isn't it? Help their wives." "I wouldn't know," she replied softly. "My mother died when I was young. I don't remember my parents' marriage." "Mine fought like cats and dogs," Nathan said with a chuckle. "But they loved each other fiercely. My father was never the same after she passed." "Is that why you agreed to this arrangement? Because your father asked it of you?" Nathan considered the question carefully. "Partly. He said Edmund Donovan was the finest man he'd ever known and that his daughter would make a good wife. But mostly, I agreed because I was tired of being alone. Riding from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. And now that you've seen what you've gotten yourself into." There was vulnerability in her question that made Nathan reach across the table, covering her hand with his. "I'm not going anywhere, Zara." She didn't pull her hand away. Progress, Nathan thought. As summer turned to fall, life in the small house at the edge of Yerington developed a comfortable rhythm. Nathan continued his work with the railroad, often coming home with stories of the surveyor's adventures and mishaps. Zara maintained the mercantile, gradually spending more time there as her confidence grew. One evening in late September, Nathan returned home to find Zara on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the Nevada desert in hues of gold and crimson. For the first time since their wedding, she was outside without her veil. "You'll catch cold," he said, shrugging out of his coat and draping it over her shoulders. Zara looked up, startled. "I didn't hear you coming." "Occupational hazard of being married to a former scout," he replied with a smile, settling into the chair beside her. "You're not wearing your veil." She touched her scarred cheek self-consciously. "It's nearly dark. No one can see from the road. You shouldn't have to hide at all." Zara sighed, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders. "Easy for you to say. You don't see how people look at me." "I see how I look at you," Nathan countered gently. "And how's that? Like you're the strongest woman I've ever met. Like you're someone I'm proud to call my wife." Zara turned to him, surprise evident in her features. "You've never called me that before, your wife." "That's what you are, isn't it?" Nathan reached out, hesitantly brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers grazing the edge of her scar. To his relief, she didn't flinch away. unless you've changed your mind about that annulment." "No," she said quickly, then more softly, "No, I haven't changed my mind." They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell over Yerington, the first stars appearing in the vast Nevada sky. When Zara finally stood to go inside, she paused, her hand resting lightly on Nathan's shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For seeing me. Not just the scars, but me." Before Nathan could respond, she had disappeared inside, leaving him with the lingering warmth of her touch and the faint scent of lavender in the cooling evening air. That night marked a turning point in their marriage. Zara began leaving her veil off more often at home, though she still wore it in town. She started asking Nathan about his day, genuinely interested in his work with the railroad. In turn, he would stop by the mercantile in the afternoons, helping her restock shelves or manage inventory before they walked home together. The townsfolk noticed. Nathan heard the whispers, saw the curious glances when he escorted his veiled wife through town. Some nodded approvingly, while others made comments just loud enough to be overheard. "Never thought she'd find a man willing to take her," one woman remarked to her companion as Nathan and Zara passed by the millinery shop. "Must be desperate or blind himself." Nathan felt Zara stiffen beside him, her grip on his arm tightening. Without breaking stride, he turned to the women with a cold smile. "Actually, madam, I consider myself the luckiest man in Nevada. Good day to you." As they continued down the boardwalk, Zara murmured, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Nathan replied firmly, "and I'll do it again if necessary." That evening, as they prepared for bed, Zara lingered in the doorway of Nathan's bedroom. He looked up from the book he was reading, surprised to find her there without her customary robe and nightcap that usually covered most of her face. "Is everything all right?" he asked, setting the book aside. "I've been thinking about what you said today," she said, her fingers nervously plucking at the fabric of her nightgown. "About being lucky." "I meant it." Zara took a tentative step into the room. "We've been married nearly 2 months and you've never. That is, we haven't." She took a deep breath. A real marriage should be more than just living in the same house. Nathan stood slowly, his heart suddenly racing. "Zara, are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated." "I don't feel obligated," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I feel ready if you want me." Nathan crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "I've wanted you since the moment you first took off that veil." Disbelief flashed across her features. "How could you, looking like this?" Instead of answering with words, Nathan cupped her face gently, his thumbs tracing both the smooth skin of her right cheek and the rough texture of her scars on the left. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender at first, almost questioning, but when Zara's arms wrapped around his neck, Nathan deepened it, pouring months of restrained desire into the embrace. He felt her response, tentative at first, then increasingly passionate. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Does that answer your question?" That night, their marriage was truly consummated, Nathan's gentle hands mapping every inch of Zara's body, showing her with actions what words had failed to convey, that her scars didn't diminish her beauty in his eyes. For Zara, each touch was a revelation, each whispered endearment a balm to years of isolation and shame. As autumn deepened toward winter, their happiness grew. Zara began accompanying Nathan to church without her veil, her head held high despite the stares. Nathan would place his hand protectively at the small of her back, his proud stance daring anyone to comment. Gradually, the townspeople's curiosity gave way to acceptance. The mercantile grew busier as customers returned, many apologizing awkwardly for their previous absence. Zara accepted their returns with grace, never mentioning the months of loneliness their avoidance had caused. December brought the first heavy snow to Yerington. Nathan came home one evening to find Zara waiting for him at the door, her face alight with excitement. "What has you so happy?" he asked, brushing snowflakes from his coat. Instead of answering, Zara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Nathan stared at her in wonder, his heart swelling with joy and pride. "A baby, you're certain, doctor?" "Marshall confirmed it this morning," Zara said, tears of happiness shining in her good eye. "In late summer, we'll be parents." Nathan whooped, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle, heedless of the snow he was tracking across the floor. "A baby," he repeated, setting her down and kissing her soundly. "Our baby." That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Nathan traced lazy patterns on Zara's skin. "I love you," he whispered against her hair, the words he'd been holding back for weeks finally finding voice. Zara raised herself on one elbow, looking down at him with an expression of such tenderness that it made his chest ache. "I love you too," she replied, bending to kiss him. "I never thought I'd say those words to anyone again." "Again," she sighed, settling back against his chest. "There was someone before. A young man who worked for my father. When the fire happened, he couldn't look at me afterward. Said he wasn't strong enough to face the stares, the gossip." Nathan's arms tightened around her. "Then he didn't deserve you." "Maybe it was for the best," Zara mused. "If he had stayed, I wouldn't have married you. Wouldn't be carrying your child." "Our child," Nathan corrected, his hand splaying protectively over her stomach. "And I intend to be the kind of father mine was present, loving, teaching our children that true beauty lies in strength of character, not in unblemished skin." Zara's breath caught. "Children? You want more than one." "I want as many as you're willing to give me," Nathan said honestly. "I've been alone too long. I want a house full of laughter and chaos and love." "So have I," Zara admitted softly. "After the fire, I thought those dreams were over. Thank you for giving them back to me." The winter months passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Nathan took on additional work with the railroad, saving every penny for the baby's arrival. Zara transformed the second bedroom into a nursery, sewing tiny garments in the evenings as they sat by the fire. The townsfolk, caught up in the couple's obvious happiness, began bringing gifts, knitted blankets, hand-carved toys, advice both solicited and not. Mrs. Johnson from down the street became a particular friend, having raised 6 children of her own. She would stop by the mercantile with baked goods and herbal teas to ease Zara's morning sickness. "Never seen a woman bloom so beautifully with child," she remarked one afternoon, as she helped Zara arrange a new shipment of fabrics. "That husband of yours must be doing something right." Zara blushed, her hand automatically going to her scarred cheek. "Nathan sees me differently than most." "He sees you clearly," Mrs. Johnson corrected. "The rest of us were blind, myself included, and I'm ashamed of it." As spring softened the Nevada landscape, Zara's body changed with the season, her slim figure giving way to the gentle curves of impending motherhood. Nathan found himself captivated by the transformation, spending long evenings with his head resting against her growing belly, talking to their unborn child. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand tracing lazy circles over Zara's rounded stomach. "Him." "Are you so certain it's a boy?" "Just a feeling," Nathan replied with a smile. "A son to teach my trades, though a daughter would be just as welcome." Zara covered his hand with hers. "If it's a boy, I'd like to name him after your father. John, wasn't it?" "John Edmund," Nathan suggested. "For both our fathers." And if it's a girl, you choose. Zara was quiet for a moment. Margaret, after my mother. Margaret Rose. Perfect, Nathan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Either way, our child will be loved beyond measure. As Zara's pregnancy progressed, she continued working at the mercantile, though Nathan insisted she take more frequent breaks. He would stop by midday, bringing her lunch and making sure she wasn't overtaxing herself. It was during one such visit in late May that disaster struck. Nathan had just left to return to his work when shouting erupted from the saloon across the street. He turned to see three men stumbling out, clearly drunk despite the early hour, arguing loudly. One of the men drew a pistol, aiming it at his companion. Nathan's warning shout came too late. The gun discharged, but the bullet went wide, shattering the front window of the mercantile. Heart in his throat, Nathan sprinted back across the street, vaulting over the broken glass to find Zara huddled behind the counter, her arms protectively wrapped around her belly. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, kneeling beside her, hands frantically checking for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her face was pale with shock. "Just startled the baby." As if in response, there was a strong kick against her hand. Zara laughed shakily. "Still active." The sheriff arrived moments later, hauling the drunken men off to jail. Nathan helped Zara close the store, sweeping up the broken glass while she tallied the day's receipts with trembling hands. "I think that's enough excitement for one day," Nathan said firmly, taking the ledger from her. "You're coming home to rest." Zara didn't argue, allowing him to escort her back to their house. Once there, Nathan insisted she lie down while he prepared a simple dinner. She fell asleep almost immediately, the stress of the day taking its toll. Nathan watched her sleep, his mind replaying what could have happened if the bullet had found a different target. The thought of losing Zara, of losing their child, was unbearable. In that moment, he made a decision. When Zara woke, Nathan was sitting beside her, his expression serious. "What is it?" she asked, pushing herself up against the pillows. "I want you to sell the mercantile." Zara blinked in surprise. "What? Why?" "Today was too close a call," Nathan explained, taking her hand. "I can't risk losing you or our baby. The railroad has offered me a permanent position overseeing the station they're building here in Yerington. It's good money, steady work. But the store was my father's legacy, and our child is ours," Nathan interrupted gently. "Your father would understand. He'd want you safe." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "I've been thinking about it anyway," she admitted finally. "Running the store and caring for a baby, it would be difficult." Relief washed over Nathan. "Then you'll consider it." "I'll do more than consider it," Zara decided. "I'll speak to Mr. Pearson tomorrow. He's been interested in buying the place for months." Nathan pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to you." By June, the sale of the mercantile was complete, and Zara found herself with time on her hands for the first time in years. She turned her attention to their home, expanding the vegetable garden, making curtains for the windows, preparing for the baby's arrival with a nest-building instinct that amused and touched Nathan. Nathan's new position with the railroad brought not only security but respect in the community. The same townspeople who had once whispered behind Zara's back now greeted the couple warmly, inviting them to social gatherings and church events. "It's strange," Zara commented one evening as they walked home from a dinner at the pastor's house. "A year ago, I couldn't step outside without children staring and adults looking away. Now Mrs. Williams wants me on the church ladies' auxiliary committee." "People can change," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "Sometimes they just need someone to show them how." "You showed me," Zara replied softly. You changed everything. The baby came in late August, on a night when the sky above Yerington was alive with shooting stars. Nathan paced outside their bedroom while Mrs. Johnson and the doctor attended Zara, her cries of pain tearing at his heart. After what seemed like an eternity, the door opened, and Mrs. Johnson beckoned him in, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Mr. Blackstone. A fine, healthy boy." Nathan entered the bedroom to find Zara propped up against the pillows, her face flushed and damp with sweat, but radiant with joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," she whispered as Nathan approached the bed. "John Edmund Blackstone." With trembling hands, Nathan accepted the newborn, staring in wonder at the perfect little face. The baby yawned, his tiny fist escaping the blanket to wave in the air. Nathan caught it gently, marveling at the miniature fingers that curled reflexively around his own. "He's perfect," Nathan breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." Zara reached up to touch her scarred cheek, a gesture that had become less frequent in recent months but still surfaced in moments of vulnerability. "Not quite." "Perfect," Nathan insisted, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and leaning over to kiss her. "Both of you, absolutely perfect." In the weeks that followed, Nathan watched in awe as Zara took to motherhood with natural grace. She sang to little John as she nursed him, told him stories as she rocked him to sleep, her face both the scarred and unscarred sides transformed by maternal love. Nathan found himself falling in love with her all over again. This woman who had overcome so much, who had given him the family he'd always longed for. He would often come home from work to find her in the garden with the baby, pointing out butterflies or clouds, teaching him about the world even before he could understand. As autumn painted the Nevada landscape in golds and reds once more, Nathan surprised Zara with a gift, a photographic portrait session with a traveling photographer who had set up temporarily in Yerington. "I want to capture our family," he explained when she hesitated. "So John will always know how beautiful his mother is." The day of the portrait, Zara spent extra time on her appearance, arranging her hair to partially obscure her scarred cheek, choosing a high-necked dress that covered the marks on her neck. As they prepared to leave for the photographer's makeshift studio, Nathan stopped her at the door. "Wait," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box, presenting it to her with a smile. A gift. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped locket. Zara opened it to find a tiny braided lock of John's hair. "It's beautiful," she whispered, blinking back tears. "Will you help me put it on?" Nathan fastened the necklace around her throat, his fingers lingering on the warm skin of her neck, tracing the line of her scars with gentle appreciation rather than revulsion. "There's something else I want you to do for the portrait." "What's that?" "Wear your hair back," he said, tucking a strand behind her ear. "Show your face, all of it, proudly." Zara's breath caught. "Nathan, our son should see his mother as she truly is, strong, resilient, beautiful despite and because of her scars. They're part of your story, part of what made you the woman I love." With trembling hands, Zara rearranged her hair, pulling it back and securing it with combs so that her face was fully visible, scars and all. "Like this?" Nathan's heart swelled with pride and love. "Exactly like that." The photographer, a kind-eyed man named Mr. Simmons, didn't so much as blink when he saw Zara's scars. He positioned the family carefully, suggesting that Nathan hold baby John while Zara stood slightly behind them, her hand resting on Nathan's shoulder. "No," Nathan said firmly. "My wife will be beside me, fully visible." Mr. Simmons nodded, rearranging them so that they sat side by side, the baby cradled in Zara's arms, Nathan's arm protectively around her shoulders. As the photographer ducked beneath his black cloth, Nathan whispered in Zara's ear, "You're the most beautiful woman in Nevada, scars and all." The flash powder exploded in a burst of light, capturing forever the image of a family bound by love rather than convention, a scarred beauty, a devoted husband, and the child who represented their shared future. When the portrait was delivered 2 weeks later, Zara stared at it in wonder. For the first time since the fire, she saw herself not as a victim, not as an object of pity or revulsion, but as a woman loved and valued. Her scars were visible in the photograph, but they didn't define her. What defined her was the confidence in her posture, the love in her expression as she gazed at her husband and son. "This is how I see you," Nathan said softly, standing behind her with his arms wrapped around her waist. "Beautiful, strong, mine." Zara turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "And you're mine, the man who saw beyond the veil." As winter settled once more over Yerington, the Blackstone home was warm with love and new traditions. They hosted Christmas dinner for the pastor and his wife, for Mrs. Johnson and her family, for neighbors who had become friends. The portrait held a place of honor above the fireplace, a testament to the journey they had taken together. On New Year's Eve, after John had been settled in his crib, Nathan and Zara stood on their porch, watching as the stars emerged in the clear, cold sky. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, wrapping a blanket around their shoulders. "How different my life is now from a year ago," Zara replied, leaning into his warmth. "Last New Year's I was alone, hiding from the world. I never imagined I could be this happy. And I never imagined finding love in a dusty Nevada town," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But here we are." "Here we are," Zara echoed, turning to face him, her scarred cheek illuminated by moonlight, no longer a source of shame but a badge of survival. "I'm not ashamed anymore, Nathan, not when I'm with you." "You never should have been," Nathan replied, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing both the smooth and scarred skin with equal tenderness. "From the moment I lifted your veil, I saw only beauty. And I saw a future I thought was lost to me," Zara whispered. "Thank you for giving me that back." As the distant church bells began to ring in the new year, Nathan kissed his wife deeply, pouring all his love and devotion into the embrace. Above them, the Nevada sky blazed with stars, silent witnesses to a love that had transcended physical appearance to find the true beauty that lay beneath. In the years that followed, the Blackstone family grew and thrived. John was joined by a sister, Margaret Rose, 2 years later, and then by another brother, William, 2 years after that. Nathan's position with the railroad expanded as Yerington grew, bringing prosperity and stability to the family. Zara never returned to running the mercantile, but she found new purpose in motherhood and in the community. The woman who had once hidden behind a veil became known throughout the region for her work with burn victims, traveling with Dr. Marshall to neighboring towns to provide care and comfort to those who bore scars similar to her own. "You gave me the courage to show my face," she told one young girl whose arms and chest had been badly burned in a kitchen accident. "And now I'm giving that courage to you." Nathan would sometimes accompany her on these journeys, watching with pride as his wife transformed from a woman ashamed of her appearance to an advocate, a healer, a beacon of hope for others who believed themselves beyond love or acceptance. Their children grew up understanding that beauty came in many forms, that scars, whether visible on the skin or hidden in the heart, were marks of survival rather than shame. John inherited his father's love of the railroad, eventually becoming an engineer. Margaret developed her mother's business acumen, opening a dressmaking shop in Yerington. William, the youngest, surprised them all by studying medicine, inspired by his mother's work with Dr. Marshall. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Yerington gathered to celebrate the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in the region. Pastor Williams, now white-haired but still sharp of mind, spoke eloquently of how Nathan and Zara's marriage had taught the community about seeing beyond appearances to the heart within. That night, as they sat on the porch of the home they had shared for a quarter-century, Zara leaned her head against Nathan's shoulder, their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Marrying a scarred bride you'd never met?" Nathan turned to look at her, at the face he had loved through joy and sorrow, through the births of their children and the passing of their parents, through all the ordinary days that made up a life well lived together. "Not for a single moment," he said truthfully. "The day I lifted your veil was the luckiest day of my life." Zara smiled, the expression transforming her face, scars and all, into a map of the journey they had taken together. "Mine too, Nathan. Mine too." And as the stars emerged above Yerington, the couple who had found love against all odds held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together, for the courage it had taken to see and be seen, and for the beautiful life they had built from the ashes of despair. The portrait above their fireplace, yellowed now with age, still showed what they had known all along, that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in the courage to love and be loved, scars and all.